Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is no stranger to the OPT Network. Her name is Amber Rollins. She's the director of kidsandcars.org. She graduated from the University of Kansas with a bachelor's degree in social welfare. She's also dedicated to the day-to-day operations of the National Education Campaign's major projects and coordinates kidsandcars.org's National Survivor Advocate and Volunteer Network. Amber, good morning and welcome back.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
So Amber, this is a subject that is not new, and from our conversation and all that we know, already 10 kids dead in cars this year.
10 kids, 10 families who will never hold their babies again.
So what are we learning from the deaths? Every year we hear about a child that is forgotten in a car. People are dismayed every single time they hear that a parent forgot a child in the car, but it is happening and it continues to happen. What are we learning?
Well, we've been educating on this for 20 years. And what we know is that education and awareness are at an all-time high, which is wonderful. That's something that we've been working really hard on. But at the same time, the number of fatalities is at an all-time high. Last year was the worst year in history for hot car deaths. 52 children died.
52 children died last year?
52 children. And so, people know about these tragedies. They hear about them on the news. We talk about them all the time. But the problem is nobody believes that this could happen to them. And that's why it continues happening.
Wow. And so this year, as we are already 10 children, 10 families in, how do we make a bigger impact?
Well, Kids and Cars has introduced a federal bill called the Hot Cars Act. And the bill would require technology in all vehicles, all new vehicles, that would prevent children from being left behind and, succumbing to the heat inside of a vehicle.
Wow. And so has that bill been passed yet, or are we still waiting?
So the bill was introduced 2 weeks ago and hasn't really had much time to have any movement yet. So we're just kind of gearing up and, would really encourage people who feel passionately about protecting children and preventing hot car deaths to call up their Congress members and ask them to become sponsors of this bill.
Mm-hmm. And so let's talk about kids that are left in cars. And is it possible that a child could survive?
It is. Children survive being left in cars every day. There are so many different factors that go into how quickly the car heats up, how quickly the child overheats. But, as a general rule of thumb, a vehicle acts like a greenhouse, and it can heat up to deadly temperatures for children within minutes, believe it or not.
Within minutes?
You combine that. Minutes. Yeah, minutes. I mean, it's most of the increase in temperature happens in the first 10 minutes that you close your car. And so, this quick run into the grocery store or leaving them napping in the car, knowingly leaving them in the car is never a safe option. And these little ones, their little body temperatures rise 3 to 5 times faster than an adult's.
Wow. And so how are we helping those families get past? And that's almost just, you don't even want to say get past, but to deal with the fact that they left their child, inadvertently left their child in a hot car.
This is something that nobody ever gets past. They live in their own kind of hell for the rest of their lives. And, we do work with a number of families all over the country that have made a choice to honor their child and to speak out and share their stories and make sure that this never happens to anybody else.
Sure.
And, these people are so courageous because the public in general is very cruel and very judgmental. And, they believe this only happens to monsters.
Absolutely. And let's just talk about that. Somebody that's saying that could never happen to me. Let's talk about how this happens.
Yeah. So, this happens to loving, responsible, highly educated parents of all walks of life happens to mothers and fathers, and
The rich, the poor.
the rich, the poor. I mean, it doesn't discriminate. And what happens is when a child is unknowingly left, you've got a parent of a very young child who's not sleeping through the night yet. And, the parents are just completely sleep deprived and fatigued. And that plays a big factor in how the memory systems in your brain function. There's science behind this.
Yes.
And, so your ability to execute a intended action in the future, such as dropping the child off at daycare, can be overlooked when you're in what we like to refer to as autopilot. Everyone out there can probably relate to jumping in the car, driving to work like you do every day, and you have no conscious thought about how you're getting there. And, you just do it because you've done it 1,000 times. Well, when you're in that autopilot mode, your brain literally cannot account for a change in routine. So if you're supposed to stop and get milk and you're in autopilot, that's not going to happen unless there's some type of jarring reminder to break you out of that autopilot and remind you to stop. Same thing goes for if you are supposed to drop the baby off at daycare.
Wow. And so let's talk about some safety mechanisms that we can all use when we have small children with us to ensure that they don't get left behind in a hot car.
Yeah, so we really encourage parents and caregivers to use the look before you lock safety checklist. So the main idea is that you want to, as a parent or a caregiver, open the back door and check the back seat every single time you park your vehicle. If you do this for a couple weeks, it becomes a habit. You don't have to think about it anymore. And, to help you get into that habit and make sure that you do it, put something that you need to start your day in the back seat. Now, a lot of people get really bent out of shape, and rightfully so, when we tell them to put the cell phone in the back
That's
seat.
what I was thinking, the cell phone.
Yes, and people get upset because they say, well, the baby's way more important than the cell phone. That's crazy. And, you're absolutely right if you're thinking that. But the idea is that we have to access our cell phone for everything these days.
Yes.
For our calendar, for, purchasing things, for work, email, you name it. We're accessing our cell phones throughout the day, every day. And so if you got to your destination and you didn't have your phone with you, chances are you would have to access your phone for something. And if you didn't have it, you'd go back to the car to get it.
Right.
So put that, if it's your cell phone, your employee badge, whatever that item is for you, put it in the back seat in front of your child's car seat on the floor so that you have to go back to get it if you don't look before you lock.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a child in daycare or childcare, ask your provider to call you immediately if they don't show up as planned. Most of these deaths happen when the child was supposed to have been dropped off and they weren't. So that one phone call could be the difference between life and death for the child.
Wow.
And then also you want to communicate. If you've got two people in the car, two adults in the car, a lot of times these tragedies happen when there's a miscommunication between those two people. And so if you're returning home, you've got 3 or 4 kids, mom may thought the dad got the baby out, dad thought the mom got the baby out.
Nobody got the baby.
It's nap time. Nobody notices the baby missing for a couple hours because the baby would be sleeping if they were inside. And, so that verbal communication, confirming, speaking out loud, double checking, all of that can help prevent a tragedy.
There you go. So before you've got to leave us, Amber, give us the website and how people can connect with all of the work and the advocacy that Kids in Cars are doing.
So our website is kidsandcars.org, and you can find us on the website. We're also on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram.
There you go. Amber, thank you so much for your dedication and hard work. We will always dial in and help our listeners and viewers to be aware of not leaving kids in hot cars. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Indeed. Hey, everybody, stay on point. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning has dealt with the pain of losing a child. A child that sadly was forgotten in a vehicle. Our guest this morning is Miles Harrison, and we welcome him all the way from Purcellville, Virginia. Miles, good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Miles, first of all, let me start by saying thank you for yours and your wife's courage to continue to talk about something that is so incredibly painful that unless this happened to you, you could never understand the anguish. So first, take us back, Miles, to the happy time when you and your wife were celebrating the life of your son, Chase.
Oh boy, it was, we adopted Chase, and the journey to, Russia 3 times and going through that, the incredible process of having to do that. And then the final trip where you actually have to go to court in Russia and petition the court to award you the child. And the court actually has a lawyer that represents the child. And they back and forth. You have to prove my home is ready. Everything is ready. We have a good plan. And then when after the court hearing, they say, okay, it's approved. That moment was so incredible for both Carol and I. And then just taking him after court back we stayed in an apartment in Moscow for a few weeks. Just to get all the visas and everything ready. And just that time that we had with him in Moscow every day, all day, it was so much fun and so joyous for us.
Tell me why you and Carol decided to go through the Russian adoption system.
At the time, we knew someone else that had done that, and they said it was not a bad process. And so that was really the reason. We just heard it was not a bad process. And we also heard that many of the children there had physical problems.
Physical disabilities?
We did. And we wanted to help a child.
Mm-hmm. And so you and your wife go through this long process of adopting, and even before adopting, but trying to conceive a child and not being able to conceive, and then you make the decision to adopt.
Yeah, that's correct. I was not able to have children, and dealing with the embarrassment of that and the shame, because it's just one of those. I'm not certainly saying I was manly, but it was one of those things where I just, wow, I couldn't have children, mm-hmm. And then having to tell my wife, hey, it's me. It's my fault.
How'd you get past that?
I think having my wife's support, saying, hey, let's adopt a needy child. There's plenty of needy children in this world. Let's adopt a needy child and raise a family together.
Wow.
So I give her all the credit.
Amazing. And so you bring Chase home and you guys start your life. And so you're getting really acclimated to the routine. By the way, how old was Chase when you all adopted him?
21 months.
Okay, so he was a toddler.
He was a toddler.
And so you had the opportunity to take him home, to meet family, and to really welcome him into your family.
Well, actually, we did a lot of studies, and we found an adoption specialist, pediatrician, who said, when you first bring him home, sequester yourselves alone and let no one come visit, so that you and this child can bond, because this child has not had any bonding with parents in his life. So for the first, I think it was 4 to 6 weeks, we had to keep everybody away just have us. So we didn't leave the house basically for 4 to 6 weeks.
So what was that time like? Was that pure joy, or
pure joy? Absolute. Well, and to watch him, he had skin problems and a lot of other issues. So just to watch the transformation of scabies, and all the problems that come with that. And then his skin was all blotted and red from it could be malnutrition,
sure.
Some other things. But to watch the transformation from that until this beautiful baby, and you have some pictures, you can still see a little of the red blotches on him on some of those pictures I sent you.
Mm-hmm.
But to see that transformation and to see that incredibly beautiful smile and blue eyes, and that kind of coming to me like a daddy, was so powerful.
So tell me what it was like for you and Carol to bring a child in and to love a child that had never experienced physical touch or love. What was that like?
Well, Carol had more experience with children than I had, because she grew up in a family of 5 brothers. So I did not. So I didn't have a lot of experience with toddlers or children. So Carol took to it like a hand in a glove. She was and is the greatest mother you could ever imagine. She is literally God's perfect woman.
High praise for Carol. And so after the 4 to 6 weeks is up and you've been sequestered in the home, then what happens?
Then it was getting near 4th of July, and we went to see my parents, my mom, in Columbus, Ohio, and went there for the 4th of July vacation or weekend. And then after the weekend came home, but, had a great time with the family in Columbus, and then came home. And then had to start the routine of putting him in daycare.
Right. So you and Carol plan a routine after the 4 to 6 weeks, which is what any mother and parents that were on maternity leave would go back to work. And now you're going to choose a daycare and you're going to start the process.
We even had my sister help us. My sister develops daycare centers.
Wow.
And so for a living, and she knows all about the operation of the daycares and the best daycare. And so she even came out, and her and my wife traveled all throughout the area to find the best daycare so that our son Chase would be in the best place.
Absolutely. Hold that thought. Let's take a break here. But when we come back, we're going to talk about those routines and how in this busy world and this thing called life, there's something called autopilot, and nobody is above it. Stay on point. We're back after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. This morning, we're talking about kids in cars and the dangers. Last year alone, 52 children died from being left in hot cars. And this year, already 10 have died, and it can happen to anybody. Our guest this morning, Miles Harrison, he and his wife, Carol, lost their baby, Chase, to a hot car death. And we thank Miles and his wife, Carol, for the courage to continue to share their story in all of the pain in order to raise awareness. And so before we went to break, Miles, we were talking about getting the routine down and being able to make it work with your life and your wife's life and her job and your job. And so tell us about the first few times that you all took him to daycare with absolutely no problem.
Yeah, well, we thought, we developed what we had thought was a good plan. I typically would drive to work, and the daycare that we selected was almost on my way to work. And then the plan was I would drop off Chase at daycare, and then Carol would pick Chase up from daycare. And now we hadn't really started implementing the plan yet. That was just our strategy. So, and it made sense. And so the daycare was off the toll road, and I would go past this exit on my way to work. So when we came back from that 4th of July, that was what our plan was going to be. I was going to drop him off, and then my wife, Carol, would pick him up.
So tell me about that fateful morning. Tell me about what happened that morning of Chase's death.
I guess like every other morning with any normal family, people are getting ready, rushing around. Oh, I forgot this. Oh, I have to take care of that. And then I had to go to drop off something at the dry cleaner. And then, of course, I had a busy work schedule. So I'm answering work phone calls, trying to be productive. So I get in the car. I get Chase in the car, and we drive, to work. I literally dropped off my dry cleaner, which is in my little town, and then get back on the road and go to work.
And I think it's important for this conversation for people to understand, because there's always going to be that question and those that say, how could you forget your baby in the car? And so for people who don't know Chase's personality, it was not uncommon with all of the challenges, the physical, emotional challenges that he was dealing with, for him to be quiet.
Yeah, he was not, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, he was not a big talker. And the car seat was behind me, so I couldn't really see him in the car.
So tell me what happens after you drop your dry cleaning off. Are you conscious then that, because forever you've not had a baby to drop off, is there a consciousness that Chase is there, or do you just sort of, when do you go on autopilot, if you remember?
I don't really ever remember going on autopilot. The only thing I remember is answering and dealing with work phone calls the whole way to work, which is about 30 to 40 minutes from where I live. And I think I heard that I had 13 phone calls between my house and then my work.
Wow.
I answered or made between 13 phone calls. So I can just tell you, when I got to work, I even, I parked the car. I even went out to lunch.
In the car?
No, I parked and then I was working, and then actually left my office and went out to lunch with my boss.
Wow.
And then came back and went and finished working in my office. And then at 5 o'clock, one of my colleagues came up into my office and said, almost jokingly, "Hey man, do you have a doll in your car?" And I didn't really catch it for a minute, and then I looked up at him and said, "A doll?" And then I think something kind of came over me. And I realized, oh my God. So I remember running out of my office and rushing to my car. And as I come up to the side in the behind the driver's seat, I could see through the window Chase. And I'm sorry. I pulled open the door and I grabbed him out of this car seat and ran back into my office screaming. I think I already knew. I ran back into my office screaming, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." And I think my boss took him out of my arms, and 911 was called, and the next thing I really remember was being in the back of an ambulance. And I remember a first responder holding my hand, to this day, trying to comfort me. And then I went to the hospital, and they asked once I started to talk a little bit, they asked if I wanted something for the pain, and I said no, I didn't deserve anything. Mm-hmm. And from there, it was to the police station where I had an interview, and I couldn't believe it, but the police almost hinted that I had
purposely left him in the car.
They asked me if I had life insurance on him. And I mean, of course I didn't. I didn't think about that. But anyway, from there, I
And now it becomes a criminal. It becomes a criminal investigation.
it did. I actually had to go into another hospital under an assumed name, so I wouldn't be arrested. And I missed my son's funeral. I couldn't get out. And then there was I was charged with involuntary manslaughter and had a very public trial. And thank goodness, I was found not guilty, but I was already guilty. I did it. I left my son in the car. I killed my own son.
Have you not been able to forgive yourself for that accident?
No. And it's interesting, I can forgive everybody else when it happens to them, but I can't forgive myself. And I think part of it is because how much I hurt my wife. I think that's part of it. But, I'm hoping that by me talking, it helps other families say, hey, this is not anybody, this can happen to anyone. I like to think I'm a pretty responsible person. But this can happen. Don't get overconfident.
Let me do this, Miles. Let me just get a quick break. And when we come back, I want to talk about those safety mechanisms that you and others are really, really advocating so this doesn't happen to another family. Stay on point, everybody. We're back right after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Miles Harrison, and we want to thank his wife, Carol, as well, as they share their harrowing story. And I just want to put this out there because there's so many of us that will sit in judgment and say, how do you forget your child? Anything can happen to anybody, and none of us should think more highly of ourselves than we ought. And I want to take this time to say, Miles, again, thank you for your courage. And I don't know the pain and the agony of losing a baby like that, and most of us don't. But I do know that I feel your heart and the feeling of love that you have for Chase and for your family is palpable. And so thank you for the courage to share this story time and time again so that hopefully no other family would have to deal with such torment, because we can feel your torment. How has that changed and affected yours and Carol's life?
Well, number one, we obviously made some new rules, and I've learned to be, I've learned to work differently. I've learned to respect how powerful your mind is, and that there are certain things that you just don't control. I've learned to come to know that. I guess the other thing is I've learned to pay more attention to those small things, the ones that bring real joy, the free things, as I'm going to call them, the ones that everyday life. I've learned to enjoy those as much as I possibly can. And I enjoy my wife, and I respect my wife more than any human being alive.
Wow. So tell me a little bit about faith and God and how you process that on this journey that has been sheer hell.
Well, as a person of faith, at one point I asked God to take me. And I asked my wife to leave me. And for whatever reason, God didn't take me, and my wife didn't leave me. And So I'm a big believer in faith. I just wish I could forgive myself. And you just told me I need to forgive myself, and that's what my wife says too. I wish I could. I wish I could. I'm not at that point. I'm just not. But I am a man of faith, and we have a home of faith.
And so that's probably why you continue this journey of sharing this story that rips you up every time you think about it. And you're trying to implement change so that other families won't have to ever know this pain. Tell us about those changes that you and Kids in Cars are hoping to implement.
Well, thank you. You're right. My mission is to have people never have to go through what I put my family through. That will be one thing that will help me heal, is that if I got communication from someone that as a result of paying attention to you or reading about you, I changed something, and as a result of that, I know that my child has been saved, or I didn't make the same mistake that you made. That would be helpful. Some of the other things that we're trying to do is we're trying to get a law passed in Congress mandating technology that warns drivers that there is a child or a pet in the back seat of their car. And if we could get that passed, it would save lives. I just bought a new car, and we were just actually at the car dealership, and I hadn't really studied the car that we bought. And then when the car was parked, my daughter got in the back seat and closed the door while the car was just sitting there. We were on the outside, as you might just walk around the car. And all of a sudden, this horn started honk, honk, honk. It scared the what out of me, the bejesus out of me. And then the salesperson said, "Oh yeah, that's technology that we put in our car so that people are warned if there's a child back there." And I started, of course, to cry. And it was a Kia Telluride. And I said, "Okay, we'll take it." And so that was, as you would say, faith. That was God saying, "That's the car for you." And so it doesn't only just have this horn, but it's got on the dashboard, "Hey, check your back seat" when you turn off the car. And then it also, if you connect to their application, it sends you a text message. So I'm hoping that other car manufacturers will follow Kia's lead and put this type of thing in their automobiles, and we don't need to have 52 deaths. And I know that if this technology was in the car in 2008, my son would still be alive. So if there's a message, I implore everyone, write their congressmen, write their senators, please get behind this. We can save lives. Please, if you do anything, don't take this for granted. It is so easy to implement. So that would be the thing that if I could ask anyone.
Absolutely. Miles, I want to thank you, and I want to thank your wife, Carol. Like I said, no one can imagine the pain that's still, and the residue of the pain and the brokenheartedness that your family has endured. Before you've got to go, I just want you to tell people just how important it is to be present. We're all multitasking, and what I heard was you were multitasking that morning, and every one of us is guilty of it.
One of the things that I've learned is that some companies have now instilled a policy that says you can't drive with your cell phone even on. Those are the things that kind of mandate you be in the here and now and in the present. I would agree with you 100%. Before you leave your home, think about that. Am I here? Am I paying attention? If I turned off and got rid of all my distraction, or am I rushing around and out of control. And I would say take the extra 10 seconds, take a deep breath, and get in the here and now so that you don't put your family through what I put my family through.
Get in the here and now. Miles, thank you so much. May God bless you, and may you very, very soon forgive yourself, because this message has become yours and Carol's ministry. Thank you so much.
Ma'am, thank you so much for having me today.
Indeed. Stay on point, everybody. We're back right after this.